It started with sirens. Blue and red lights flashing across the calm ripples of the lake I just bought. An HOA woman in a floral blouse stood by the water's edge, phone in hand, yelling like she was leading an army. "Officer, he's trespassing. He can't own our lake." The officer gave her a puzzled look. "Mom, he owns it." That was the moment I knew. I was dealing with a storm disguised as a neighborhood. 3 weeks earlier, I had bought this piece of forgotten paradise. A small private lake tucked behind the row of identical suburban homes that made up Crestwood Estates, HOA. The deal was perfect. Cheap, quiet, surrounded by oak trees and misty mornings. No one had cared about the lake for years. The HOA treated it like scenery. Something to photograph for their newsletters but never maintain. So when I purchased it from the original landowner, I thought I was just buying peace. I was wrong. In the suburbs, peace is a threat to control. The day I moved in my small boat and fishing chair, the whispers started. Curtains twitched. SUV doors slammed. And then came her, the president of the Crestwood, Margaret, a woman whose perfume could arrive before she did. She marched down the slope like she owned the earth. "Excuse me," she snapped. "This lake belongs to Crestwood residents." I turned slowly, calm as ever. "Not anymore, Mom. The deed's in my name." She froze, then laughed like I just told her a bad joke. "You can't just buy a community lake." "Oh, but I did," I replied, unfolding the papers. "And you're standing on my property line." That's when her smile vanished. Behind it I saw something colder, power bruised. She stormed off, her heels stabbing the dirt like daggers. Within hours, HOA emails started flying. "Unauthorized structures near Crestwood waters," one said. Another threatened fines for disturbing community balance. They even posted signs overnight. "Pi et esho paro part membrs only." By the next morning, my dock had been vandalized. The ropes cut, my canoe half sunk. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to play defense. I was going to end this on a level they couldn't touch. For days, I gathered every document I could. Deeds, maps, ownership boundaries dating back to 1964. The HOA had no claim. But they had something else, noise. Margaret organized neighborhood meetings. She stood on a folding chair, waving her clipboard like a general. "We will reclaim our lake. This outsider can't take what's ours." I watched from my porch as they clapped. Angry faces glowing under porch lights. That night, my phone buzzed, private number. "You're making a mistake," a voice said. "You'll regret crossing us." I hung up and smiled, because I'd already made a call of my own. The next morning, I walked to the lake with a surveyor's drone and a GPS receiver. A white truck pulled up. Margaret again. This time with her HOA enforcement committee. "What do you think you're doing?" she barked. "Measuring my property," I said. She stepped closer. "You can't. This is community land." I pointed to the sign I just planted, Puditor en power et en ar federal raleigh ebu. Her eyes widened. "Federal," I just smiled. "You'll see." Because what Margaret didn't know was that the lake she was fighting over wasn't just a pretty pond. It was an unregulated water body that technically fed into a navigable stream, which meant one thing. It fell under federal jurisdiction, and I had just reached out to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. By the end of the week, the lake wasn't just water anymore. It was a battlefield. Margaret had turned the entire HOA into her personal army. Flyers went out. Social media posts exploded. Unapproved owner attempting to restrict access to community lake. HOA taking legal action. I woke up one morning to find a line of SUVs parked by the shore. People in pastel polos and sun hats stood there with folded arms, staring at me like I'd committed some kind of crime. One man shouted, "You can't block the lake. We pay dues for this." I just looked up from my toolkit. "You've been paying dues," I said, "to a piece of land your HOA never owned." That's when Margaret showed up again, sunglasses flashing, voice like a siren. "You're finished here," she hissed. "We'll see about your ownership once the authorities arrive." I asked, wiping my hands. She smirked. "Oh, they're already on their way." Within minutes, I heard the wail of sirens echo across the lake. 2 police cruisers rolled in, lights bouncing off the water. Margaret stood proud, pointing dramatically. "There he is. He's trespassing and blocking community property." The officer stepped out, calm but cautious. One of them, Officer Ray, walked over and said, "Sir, We got a report of a property dispute. Dispute. I laughed. Just a misunderstanding. I pulled out a folder. The deed, stamped and notarized. Officer Ray scanned it, then looked up at Margaret. Mom, this looks legitimate. Her face turned red. That can't be. That lake belongs to Crestwood. He raised an eyebrow. Got any paperwork proving that? As she froze. Silence, the kind that made every neighbor's whisper louder. Then came the next move, the desperation play. Margaret pointed at my sign that read, Private Property under Federal Review. See, he's making false claims about Federal Review. That's illegal. I smiled faintly. Actually, it's not false. The second officer looked up. Wait, what's this about Federal Review? I leaned in, calm as ever. The Army Corps of Engineers has been contacted. They're assessing jurisdictional boundaries. Until they're done, any alteration or interference with this water body could be considered a federal offense. You could feel the air tighten. Margaret's smirk faltered. Federal offense. She muttered, her voice cracking. Officer Ray nodded slowly. Ma'am. That means your HOA can't touch this until the review is complete. The neighbors shifted uncomfortably. The crowd that had come to cheer her on was now backing away, whispering. Margaret's jaw clenched. Yo, you can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you, I said. I'm just protecting what's mine. She stormed off, screaming into her phone. I'll fix this. I'll fix all of it. But it was already out of her hands. Because that afternoon, a black SUV with government plates rolled down Crestwood Drive. Two men in khaki uniforms stepped out, badges glinting under the sun. The crowd of nosy neighbors gathered again, whispering like bees. One of the agents spoke calmly, flipping open a file. We're with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We received a jurisdictional review request for this body of water. Margaret tried to interject, her voice trembling. This is private HOA land. The agent cut her off. Actually, Mom, according to historical survey maps, this lake is connected to a navigable stream, making it subject to federal oversight. She blinked. Federal oversight. He nodded. Which means, until our review is complete, this property and its surrounding perimeter are temporarily off limits to public and community access. The words hit like thunder. Off limits. To everyone. Neighbors turned to Margaret. Stunned. The same people who had clapped for her a week ago. Like she'd dragged them into a war they couldn't win. I stood by the water, silent, watching the reflection of their faces ripple across the lake. That night, a group chat went quiet. No more threats. No more community unity. Speeches. Just silence and panic. But Margaret wasn't done. She couldn't let go of control. And when people like her lose power, they don't retreat. They escalate. Because the next morning, I found something floating at the edge of the water. A pile of shredded papers, soaked and twisted. The HOA's bylaws. And a single note taped to my dock. Chore, you think you won. You have no idea what's coming. The next few days were a storm disguised as silence. Margaret disappeared from the streets, her silver Lexus missing from its usual spot. The HOA bulletin board, once filled with warnings and community reminders, stood empty. It was strange, like the whole neighborhood had paused, holding its breath. Then, on the fifth morning, she resurfaced. I saw her striding across the street in a crisp navy suit, clipboard in hand, trailed by two men in dress shirts. They looked official, but not that official. Probably her lawyer and some consultant she'd hired to intimidate me. Mr. Reynolds, she called out with that sharp, rehearsed smile. We need to discuss your so-called ownership. I looked up from my driveway, leaning on the shovel I'd been using to edge the garden. Ownership isn't so-called, Margaret. It's recorded. She ignored me, flipping papers. You've caused chaos in this community. Closing off public land, threatening residents. Spreading misinformation about federal involvement. Margaret. I interrupted. The federal involvement isn't misinformation. You'll be getting their notice soon. As if on cue, a dark SUV rolled into the cul-de-sac parking by the curb. The same two Army Corps agents stepped out, clipboards in hand. The lawyer blinked. Who are they? Margaret's smile froze. One of the agents, the older one, nodded politely. Good morning. We're here to post a federal notice regarding the jurisdictional review of this lake. No property alterations or access are permitted until the evaluation is complete. Margaret scoffed. You can't just show up and claim jurisdiction. This is private HOA property. The agent pointed at her. That statement would require proof of ownership. Do you have a title deed or any registered plat showing the OA is the owner of the lake? She stammered. It's implied ownership, established by community tradition. Implied ownership, he repeated, writing something down. That's not a legal term, ma'am. I almost smiled. Almost. The agent continued, reading from a printed statement. Until this review concludes, any person entering or altering this property without authorization will be in violation of federal environmental statutes, specifically the Clean Water Act Section 4-4. Her lawyer frowned. You're saying this OA could face federal penalties? Yes, sir. The agent replied flatly. Civil and criminal penalties. Up to $50 per day of unauthorized interference. That was the moment the mask cracked. Margaret's hand trembled. Her voice, once sharp enough to slice through a crowd, now came out as a whisper. You can't be serious. I'm very serious, the agent said. And this order will be publicly filed by the end of the day. The two agents walked off toward their SUV, leaving behind a sign hammered into the soil at the lake's edge. Under federal review, no access without authorization. The neighbors gathered again, phones out, murmuring. Did she just get shut down by the government? One man whispered. Another chuckled. Guess the HOA's not higher than the Army, huh? Margaret spun around, her face red, eyes blazing. This isn't over, she shouted. But it was. At least for me it was. That night my phone buzzed with messages. Screenshots of online threads, people sharing the federal notice, memes of Margaret with the caption, HOA vs US Army. Guess who lost? It went viral locally. Even a small news blog covered a suburban A tried to claim a lake. Turns out it's under federal protection. By morning, Margaret's tone had changed completely. The HOA issued a public clarification statement, saying they were cooperating with authorities and supporting federal environmental protection. Translation: they'd been legally muzzled. Still, she couldn't help herself. A week later, she filed a civil complaint against me, claiming unjust interference with community assets. I didn't even flinch, because by then, I wasn't alone anymore. 2 more government SUVs parked outside my home that afternoon. Environmental inspectors, surveyors, and an Army Corps liaison stepped out, not to question me, but to thank me for reporting an unregistered OA land claim. Turns out, the HOA had built unauthorized drainage extensions into the lake years ago. Federal land violations. Margaret's little community beautification projects had just become evidence. When they told her, she nearly fainted. The agents confiscated HOA records and photographed the area. Margaret stood there shaking, clutching her phone, whispering, You can't do this to me." I didn't say a word. Because she was right. I wasn't doing it to her. The law was. That night, the HOA board called an emergency session. Neighbors who once cheered for her were now demanding answers. Refunds, resignations. Someone leaked the recording. Her panicked voice yelling, "I told you to cover the pipes. Delete those photos." Her empire was collapsing in real time. By the weekend, she'd resigned, for personal reasons. The HOA chat went silent again. The lake, once noisy with gossip, now reflected peace, pure, blue, untouched. But there was still one last thing I had to do. The part that would make it permanent. I drafted a letter, formal, clear, and irreversible, and sent it straight to the Corps of Engineers for. As the registered owner of the property known as Crestwood Lake, I hereby request designation of the water body as a protected wetland under Section 404 jurisdiction. It took 2 weeks for the approval to come through. When it did, I stood by the shore, reading the stamped document under the morning light. Protected federal wetland restricted access. No OA, no rules, no trespassers. Just peace. It was supposed to be over. The lake was federal property now, off limits to everyone. Even me unless authorized. The HOA couldn't touch it, couldn't claim it, couldn't even build a fence near it. But people like Margaret don't know when to stop. They don't accept defeat, they rebrand it. A month later, a new sign appeared at the entrance to the neighborhood. Community Environmental Restoration Committee. Sponsored by Crestwood. And at the center of it all, Margaret Wilcox. She was back. No longer the president, but acting chairperson of environmental outreach. The woman had turned her downfall into a campaign. She was hosting cleanup days, organizing awareness events, and telling everyone that the lake was being reviewed thanks to her efforts. The audacity almost made me laugh. But the next stunt wasn't funny. One Saturday morning I woke up to the sound of engines, trucks rumbling, voices shouting orders. When I stepped outside, I froze. There they were, Margaret and her volunteers, cutting through the caution tape, unloading shovels, banners, and garbage bins. She had a megaphone in hand, shouting, "We're taking back our lake. This land belongs to the community." I walked down the hill, disbelief in every step. "Margaret, are you insane?" I shouted over the noise. She turned, smiling that same smug smile. "I'm doing what's right," she said. "If the feds won't clean it, we will. Margaret, this is federal land now." She laughed, voice echoing across the water. "Oh please, what's the army gonna do? Arrest us for picking up trash." She didn't realize that the noise she'd stirred up had already drawn attention. 10 minutes later, 2 black SUVs and a government truck rolled in, tires crunching over gravel. Agents stepped out, calm but grim, flanked by a local sheriff's cruiser. "Mom," one of them called out, "this area is under federal protection. You and your team are in violation of a direct order." Margaret froze. Her volunteers looked at each other nervously. One whispered, "Wait, this is real." The agent walked closer, reading from his file. "Tour, the unauthorized entry and modification of a federally protected site. You are subject to citation under Title 33 U.S. Code." Margaret stammered, "We're just cleaning up." He replied evenly, "Cleaning up is still interference when the area is restricted." The sheriff approached her next, hand resting on his belt. "Ma'am, we warned you last time. You need to stop testing the law." Her voice cracked. "You don't understand. This was my lake." He shook his head slowly. "Not anymore." The agents began taking photos, cataloging every shovel and trash bag like evidence. Margaret's team quietly backed away, loading their tools into trucks, pretending they weren't part of it. Within minutes, it was just her, standing by the shore, shaking, furious, and alone. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The sound of the camera shutters was louder than any argument she could make. Then came the final blow. 2 weeks later, a certified envelope arrived at every home in Crestwood. A federal report. Plain and simple tour. Due to repeated interference and mismanagement, the Crestwood HOA is barred from any jurisdictional authority over Crestwood Lake and its adjoining properties. Any future access will be considered trespassing. The message was clear. The AI wasn't just powerless. It was finished. Margaret's little empire, the one she built on arrogance and control, was gone. The next morning her house went dark. Curtains drawn, no car in the driveway. The same woman who used to patrol the neighborhood with a clipboard was now invisible. Rumor had it she'd moved away quietly. Some said she sold her house. Others said she fled before facing federal fines. Nobody really knew, and honestly nobody cared. Because Crestwood was peaceful again. No more flyers. No more fake rules. No one arguing about mailbox paint or lawn length. Just quiet mornings and the sound of the lake. Still sacred free. I stood there one evening, the sky burning orange over the water. The "no access" sign shimmered in the light, the reflection dancing across the surface. That's when I heard a small voice behind me. "My son." "Dad," he asked, "why'd they fight you so hard over the lake?" I smiled softly. "Because some people don't like it when you stop letting them control what was never theirs." He thought for a moment. "So who owns it now?" I looked out at the calm water. "Technically, the government," I said. Then I smiled. "But in truth, nobody owns nature, son. We just borrow it." The wind rustled through the reeds. The neighborhood was quiet again. Truly quiet for the first time in years. And somewhere out there, Margaret Wilcox was learning what it felt like to have no audience, no authority, no one to boss around. Because sometimes karma doesn't come as revenge. It comes as silence. And silence, in the suburbs, is louder than any siren.